I've always had a strange knack for picking the wrong men. It's almost laughable when I think back on it now. I even had a little saying I used jokingly to myself: saving the world, one moron at a time. Of the time, it was harmless humor. Most of the time, it made me feel better about past mistakes. But sometimes, those mistakes landed me in a situation that drained every ounce of patience, sanity, and self-respect I had, and that's exactly how Bob entered my life. That's not his real name, of course. Bob fits the story because he embodied every stereotype I thought I would avoid: lazy, deceitful, and completely incapable of any kind of responsibility. I met Bob almost 12 years ago, while working one of my 2 jobs at the local mall. He worked in a different store, one I occasionally passed on breaks. I noticed him because he had this unusual way of making you feel seen. Even in a crowded, busy mall, he had a smile that made strangers linger a second longer in conversation, and a laugh that, for reasons I can't fully explain, drew me in. What began as casual chats eventually stretched into long discussions after work. Within a few months, we were officially a couple. Moving in together seemed like the next logical step. At the time, I was lonely, and I thought that cohabitation would cement our relationship. In hindsight, it was the first real mistake in a series of catastrophes I couldn't have anticipated. At first, Bob was charming in his own strange way, but the red flags appeared quickly, like little flashing lights I ignored because I wanted to believe in love. The first were absurd. He claimed there were only 4 continents, insisting that the rest were owned by the Martian government. When I challenged him, he would spiral into circular reasoning, insisting that if I didn't agree, I was obviously misinformed. Another time, asked him where he had lived before staying with his mother. He told me he had camped in the woods for months on end. No gear, no tent, no explanation. He simply gestured at himself, as though his body alone was all the survival equipment one could ever need. At first, I laughed. His ridiculous stories were almost endearing, but charm doesn't pay bills, and his inability to handle reality soon became a pervasive drain on my life. The worst trait, by far, was his laziness. I've never met anyone remotely like him. For long stretches, he was unemployed, and during that time, he did nothing but sit in our apartment watching Netflix DVDs or playing some war game online. And when I say playing, I mean hours upon hours spent typing, strategizing, and chatting in a group while the apartment slowly rotted around him. Dirty dishes stacked high, clothes piled in corners, and a smell that could gag a maggot hung in the air. His personal hygiene was non-existent. He showered maybe once a week. I would come home exhausted from triple shifts, expecting some semblance of a shared life, and be greeted by this chaos, this mess, this fog of indifference. I tried to be patient. I really did. I tried to help him improve, to guide him gently, to encourage him to take responsibility. I helped him fill out job applications, drove him to interviews, and even let him use my phone to make calls, since he didn't have one. I told myself that support and patience would pay off eventually, but it didn't. Instead, small inconsistencies began to pile up, whispering at me that all was not as it seemed. Nights he claimed to spend with his friend Ben became suspiciously long. Odd absences and unexplained trips crept in. He began borrowing my car more frequently, citing the same friend as the reason. I wanted to trust him, had to, but every time I did, the knot in my stomach tightened. The first real alarm came one night when he asked to borrow my car to attend a card tournament. He spun a story about how winning the prize would help us financially, and how it was a sure thing. Reluctantly, I agreed, thinking this would be a one-off. I bought myself a couple of energy drinks and a little vodka, planning to have a quiet night at home. Hours ticked by, then stretched into an agonizing eternity. I eventually passed out, only to awaken violently ill at the crack of dawn. My body convulsed. I spent hours on the bathroom floor, retching until there was nothing left. My head pounded, my body ached, and I had no phone, no car, and no Bob. The apartment felt like a cage, suffocating and hostile. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to crawl to my bedroom, wrap myself in a bathrobe, and stagger down the apartment stairs to beg for help. It took knocking on 3 doors before a neighbor let me use their phone. My mother arrived within minutes and rushed me to the ER, where I was diagnosed with a particularly aggressive, antibiotic-resistant strain of C. diff. Bob showed up later that afternoon, phone and car in hand, feigning concern. I could barely process his casual demeanor, his audacity, and the sheer lack of empathy. That night marked the beginning of the unraveling of our relationship, even though I didn't yet know the full extent of his deceit. The months that followed were exhausting. We scraped by on my income alone. Jobs came and went for Bob, often lost for ridiculous reasons. He seemed incapable of consistency. Eventually, I managed to get him a job as a delivery man for a rental company that leased furniture and electronics. I knew the manager personally through my work and vouched for him. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the turning point. It wasn't. Within weeks, I came home to find a brand new TV and entertainment system in the living room. Bob was grinning like a child, eyes shining with pride. "It's fine," he said. "I got a massive employee discount. The payments will come out of my paycheck." I was furious. We could barely afford food, and here he was, making massive financial decisions without consulting me. Weeks later, when rent was late, the TV mysteriously disappeared. Relief flickered until I found a pawn slip in his jeans pocket. He had pawned the TV. Rage consumed me. I confronted him, but he waved off my concerns, insisting he had plans to retrieve it and no one would ever know. The true revelation came with a phone call. One afternoon, woman called asking for Bob. My stomach dropped. I lied, claiming to be his wife, and she said she would call back. When she did, her name was June. She revealed the truth. Bob had been cheating on me, secretly dating her while living with me. Every suspicious absence, every borrowed car trip, every night spent online, it wasn't for friends or games. It was for her. He had even given her gifts that belonged to me, including a silver hummingbird necklace my mother had given me. She described my apartment in uncanny detail: bed sheets, furniture, even personal items from a hidden box under my bed. Fury, adrenaline, heartbreak, they all collided inside me. June and I decided to act. We would confront Bob together and make him face the consequences of his lies. I called a coworker, sobbing and desperate, who got someone to cover my shift and drove me to the car. As we drove toward Bob's workplace, my heart pounded. Every scenario played through my mind. What if he ran? What if he lied? What if the confrontation spiraled out of control? When I arrived, the manager stopped me, asking about payments. I explained the pawn slip and Bob's actions. The manager's eyes widened. Pawning rental items was illegal and grounds for immediate termination. He said that if we returned the TV, Bob would be fired immediately. My heart raced. This was it. I waited outside, fumbling with my nerves, when Bob appeared. His guilt was palpable. He stumbled through excuses, trying desperately to spin the narrative. And then June arrived, calm and precise. Her voice, steady but cutting, laid out the truth. Bob's face drained of color. He had nowhere to hide, no lies left unexposed. Finally, confronted him directly. "We are done," I said. "I want you out. Your sister can pick up your things. Now give me the key." He refused, using his size to intimidate me, but I didn't flinch. My parents arrived moments later, like reinforcements from some divine army. My father drove me to the pawn shop to retrieve the TV. My mother hugged me, whispering comfort and reassurance. We returned the TV to the manager, who signed the cancellation paperwork and fired Bob on the spot. My father handed me back the apartment key, jaw clenched, a smirk of satisfaction crossing his face. "Now he's jobless and homeless," he said. Bob returned days later to collect his few possessions. Friends ensured he didn't get a word in. That was the last I ever saw him. Social media blocks weren't even necessary. He made no attempt to contact me. Years later, I'm happily married to my high school sweetheart. Raising two beautiful boys. The scars from that period linger: trust issues, weight loss, sleepless nights. But I have grown leaps and bounds as a person. I've learned that kindness has limits, patience has boundaries, and sometimes the best revenge is simply reclaiming your life. Even now, late at night, I sometimes think of Bob. Is he out there, in the woods, with nothing but a stick and his wits, waiting for the Martian government to take over? Perhaps, but it doesn't matter. I am free, I am whole, I am living my life, and that, in itself, is the sweetest revenge of all.